Operations and Monitoring Committee, and in our bilingual city, I'd say Morena no mai haere mai, kia te Operations and Monitoring Committee, and we'll open the meeting by calling for apologies. I have one from Mayor Chadwick, who is on council business in Wellington, Councillor Tapsell, who's also on council business, who's speaking at our Women's Day Symposium in Auckland. Also have apologies from Mr Stanton and Councillor Kent. Would someone like to move that those apologies be received? Moved Councillor Gould, seconded Councillor Okawa-Tate. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Number 2 is declarations of interest. And I think it behoves us, rather than brushing over this, that I read the first paragraph so the members of the public understand what a conflict of interest is. Members need to stand aside from decision-making when a conflict arises between their role as a member of the council and any private or other external interests they may have. This note is provided as a reminder to members to review the matters on the agenda and assess and identify where they may have a pecuniary or other conflict of interest. It doesn't necessarily have to be just pecuniary, or they may have a perception of a conflict of interest. So you may not have a pecuniary conflict of interest, but the perception of a conflict of interest is also got to be taken into account. Would any member like to declare a conflict of interest? Councillor Bentley.
Stage 2 of the meeting today is under confidential.
In the council meeting?
Sorry?
Regarding Rotorua or
regarding
in our agenda?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bentley. Let that be noted. Are there any other urgent items not on the agenda? I do have one. In confidential, I have asked the Chief Executive Officer to give an update on matters relating to the motion that was passed last Thursday, and he's prepared to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive Officer. Are there any other items of urgent business? None, thank you. Presentations. Right, then the first item on the agenda is under 4.1. Portia McKenzie. Oh, before I move any further, I would like to welcome members of the public and staff to the meeting, and in particular, a big welcome to Ian McLean. I know the work that he's done with regard to our council confidential matter on the Rotorua Ehu sewage treatment plant, and also Bay of Plenty Regional Councillor, Councillor Winters. Welcome to our meeting. And also Shirley Trumper, our Rural Community Board member, members of staff, and also members of the community. Welcome. Welcome, Portia. The floor's yours. Sorry?
I'm actually going to jump in first.
Okay, sorry,
Portia. We're tag teaming. Good morning, members. So just a reminder that LTP consultation opened on Monday. So what we've got for you today is 2 short clips. The first one is the finalisation of the animation around the LTP and that whole awareness about the themes and topics to be covered in the consultation. And then we'll lead into the video clip that Portia has around the big moves, and she'll probably say a few words about that just before we play that video. So I'll just look to Hilda if she could bring up the LTP animation. So members, we currently have this animation up on the Let's Talk platform, and we'll also be sharing this amongst all our other engagement avenues, and we can have it available as part of your engagement collateral as well when we go out and about meeting face to face. So.
Just before we move on, just so that there's no comment in the media, I would like to thank Sally Smythe in our Democracy corporate team. She's a graphic designer and she put together in-house that wonderful presentation. So thank you, Sally. I understand she's sick today, Una, so thank you very much. Right.
Kia ora, I'm Steve Chadwick, the Mayor of Rotorua. Well, the big moves are part of our long-term plan and they're the next step, so it's the next chapter of where we're going. And we've signalled some very exciting projects in the big moves and we need your feedback. Let's have a closer look at what we're proposing.
Rotorua is our home, and we are its people. Our vision for this year and beyond is to build on the good work that has gone before, to continue developing and crafting Rotorua as an exciting and attractive place for everyone, for our whānau, for our manuhiri, to drive opportunity, enterprise and diversity, and support a legacy of sustainability for our environment. Mō te katoa a Rotorua. E nāia nei mea popo, tātou tātou. Rotorua is a place for everyone, today and tomorrow. We together. We are now preparing to enter the next chapter of our long-term vision, projects known as the Big Moves. The Big Moves will bring together 4 projects focusing on the outer perimeter of the CBD, which will add value for both locals and visitors. Each project will grow and develop over time. Our first project is Tahi, focusing on Kuiro Park with a strong emphasis on family first. Whānau Tahi. The primary goal of this project is to enhance Kuiro Park as Rotorua's premier family destination, with geothermal and aquatic play activities and community gathering spots. Our park telling our story. Second is Rua, focusing on a new look for the Rotorua lakefront. The primary goal of this project is to develop a world-class lakefront experience to support our economy and encourage visitors to return. It will be a unique lakefront experience delivered the Rotorua way. Third is Toru. As guardians of our natural environment, this project will deliver a care program for our unique sanatorium reserve, the 4th largest geothermal habitat in New Zealand. The primary goal of this project is to restore, protect and develop the reserve and set the scene for future ecotourism. And 4th is Whā, a project incorporating ongoing development of world-class whakarewarewa forest. The primary goal of this project is the further accessible forest trails and infrastructure for Rotorua's CBD and its surrounding. On completion of these big moves, an front, our ecology and our forest. Koene tō tātou kainga. Ko tā rata. This is our home. We are its people. The first steps toward our big move get underway.
Hei aha o whakaaro, what do you
in in-house production of there, Portia, if you'd like to follow on.
Yeah, so just following on from what Una said, this is just a piece, one piece of collateral that we can use to showcase some of the work that we're doing in the big moves through the
Thank you, Portia, for that. We're going to be showing this. Is this going to be on a loop at, say, Te Akamori and any other places around town?
through Te Akamori, through all our avenues. And
Kia ora, mōrena tātou. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Portia. Thank you for the presentation and Una too. He rawe katoa. Just one little you should have probably sang that whole thing. You probably would have sounded really good. But is there a chance to sort of is that and the pronunciation? If we could fix that up a little bit.
yeah, this is
Would someone like to move that they be accepted? Are there any matters that councillors want to raise regarding those minutes? There be none. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Now, the financial performance. January 31st. And 56, so we'll go to Thomas's presentation, and welcome, Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors and board members. Just wait for, thank you, Hilda. I've written a report in your agenda, so just giving you a brief overview of where the finances are tracking at the end of January, which is obviously 7 months into the financial year. So the trend that we were talking about pre-Christmas with regards to some cost pressures has continued a little bit. So we've had a slight deterioration in our operating expenses as a result of further costs associated with some So at the moment we are tracking about 2 million behind budget. So we talked, sorry. These pressures just graphically showing you about how they're impacting. So, Councillor Gould, the scale on the left does not reflect any financial numbers or so forth. It's just to give you a reference point of the sort of size relative to each other of what we're experiencing. So electricity at the moment is, pushed our costs up by about $500,000 a year. The landfill is tracking just slightly above that as well at the moment, and the weather events are also contributing, hundreds of thousands of dollars of extra pressures on our finances at the moment. We talked at the last O&M with regards to the mitigation measures and how the operations team were targeting close to $1 million worth of savings, and the infrastructure team is targeting $500,000 of savings to pull that result back by the end of the year. And I think it's just important at the moment to just talk about that while we are implementing those mitigations, there are consequences of those. And those consequences will be seen in some levels of service that the community may see. Because as you know, we don't have a lot of discretionary spend, things that we can just turn off and redirect. And so where we are redirecting, we're having to make conscious decisions of why we're doing that. I think the important thing to note, though, is that all critical work will get done. So it's that balancing of critical work versus non-critical work. Non-critical work are things where we can defer or we can live with the consequences of those actions during a short period of time. So just reinforcing again, all critical work will get undertaken, but we are reviewing and deferring non-critical work as a result. And obviously that is the discretion that is applied by the staff and the managers and the group managers on a case-by-case basis. As a result, we still anticipate that by the end of the year, to end the year within 1% of budget. So we don't believe we can claw all of it back in the operating result at this point of time. We still believe we're going to get exposed a little bit further to electricity charges. We also know that the landfill, those pressures there will continue for the remainder of the year, knowing that we have corrected, provided more funding in next year's budget. Capital expenditure continues to track ahead of budget. Reasons being obviously those significant projects that were well advanced at the start of the year, but that spend above budget is slowly moving back to being on track by the end of the year. And as a result, though, mainly due to the pressures of the operating result, it could potentially be an additional $1 million worth of more borrowings by the end of the year. But obviously that is something that we'll manage and hopefully pull back as well over the coming 4 to 5 months. So any questions?
Councillor Kawatate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whenever I hear the word defer, I sort of become somewhat uneasy. So, because I think half the problems we have has resulted from works being deferred. So I'm just wanting to get a bit of a handle on, can you be a little bit more specific about what is actually being deferred? I know you did say it's not major works, but there's usually a flow-on impact on some other work. So just a bit of a handle, please, just to make sure it's not something that's likely to turn around and bite us in the bum. Thank you.
No, so everyone is very conscious of the fact that we have no desire of doing any actions that will have negative consequences into the long term. So it may be things such as a light bulb may blow in a street light that is not in a critical area, and that bulb may just be replaced at a later date rather than critical. Metallling of roads, it may be a 1 to 2 month delay before that road is metalled. It may be that potholes last a little bit longer rather than getting repaired the following week and those sorts of things. So it's just that's the level of impact that we're talking about. We're not talking about any significant negative impact on our infrastructure or on our residents. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you able to go back to that slide which was showing all the various, yeah, that's it. So the question I have, Mr. Colley, is the electricity pricing. Why is it sort of, you mentioned it would be about $500,000 each year or something, and yet there's a lot of rain around, a lot of water. It's not a problem in the dam. There's an explanation, but if you could give that to me.
Yeah, it's a problem, or has been a problem, that it's been in the wrong places. So while our summer has been not the driest, unfortunately a lot of the hydroelectricity is generated in the South Island, and the South Island has experienced previously a very good summer, is my understanding. And so what you've seen is that an average rate that we normally pay is about 5 cents, I think, per kilowatt. We're seeing that during that summer period go up to 10 and 15 cents. And so it's just during that period. In the last couple of weeks with that ex-cyclone that came through, it has topped up those hydro lakes significantly, and we have now seen those electricity rates substantially reduced back to now what we consider normal levels. But unfortunately we did have to, I'll use a bad pun, weather that bad period of dry lakes. And as you know as well, we don't lock in electricity pricing like normal, like other people, like you and I do in our own residential purposes. So we do buy electricity on the spot rate. Over the last 4 to 5 years, that has delivered substantial savings to council in the multiples of millions of dollars, and this unfortunately is one of those years whereby we are experiencing a little bit of the opposite.
Councillor Maxwell, Mr Patawa Basani Tule, welcome.
Morning, Mr Chair. Kia ora tātou. Kia ora, Thomas. 6 months ago, we spoke about the electricity prices, and you kept referring back to the spot prices. I kind of flippantly asked for some modelling, but you said, don't worry about it, the market will adjust. And today you've come back and said it's still out of whack. So your advice from 6 months ago around spot pricing and stability, and for us confidence around these prices, and today you're saying it's still out. So what is it? Is there something you can do for us so we can have some reliability into the future, rather than continuously be put on the spot about this electricity pricing going out? Give us some kind of certainty about what's coming, because every single time we come back to this meeting, you assure us, but then you come back to the next meeting and say, well, it's out. Is there modelling that we can do, just predictors? I know you can't spot the weather and you can't predict things, but you can do modelling in-house?
Well, no, and I think you just answered your question there, and I do take exception to your comment around the assurances that you believe I may have provided you 6 months ago and the flippant comment. So as I've said all along, we do buy electricity on the spot price. I can't model that, and neither can any clairvoyant person in New Zealand. So the only alternative is moving council away from buying on the spot price and fixing the price, and then living with an increase in the budgets with regards to doing so.
No, it was about, my flippant comment was, could you provide some modelling? And you said we didn't need that because you were fairly certain we could get that under control. I'd like to see the last year and around our electricity, and then trend it for 6 months. And then at least if we're close to trend, based on the weather, there's some certainty for us, because right now we're just getting every single meeting, it's going up. But there's assurances, then it goes up again, then there's more assurances. Show me something.
Look, as I said at the last meeting, the risk was always continuing dry weather and low hydro dams, which is what I've said all along. That is what our reliance is on. I can't model that for you. I don't think anyone in New Zealand can model that for you.
Mr Patawa Basani Tuli, in a previous life on this council, Kerry Starling, when I was Chair of Finance, when we went from a fixed price to spot market electricity, I think in the first year we saved $330,000. And I think the points you raise are good, but what Mr Collet is raising is he can't control what the spot market is going to do. At the moment it's come back on track, you say, Thomas?
No, that's correct. The pricing has returned to what's considered normal levels, because the hydro lakes have returned to good levels in the south. Yep.
But if we go to a fixed price, I think those are the two options, is to go to a fixed price, which is a lot higher, or take the risk on the spot price. And I think it's a responsible attitude of Mr Collet to report that back to us, what the fluctuations are. And but your points are well made.
Just a model that says over the 12 months previous, with 6 months in, with some indicators between if we went this way with that price structure of locked, this way, just show me something so I don't keep getting surprised by this big power bill. Because in my house, if the power bill goes up, everyone's lights get turned off. That's it. But in this way, I can't figure it. Every single meeting, it seems like
I think if we turn street lights off and
I'd like to at least get some certainty.
That sort of thing would be in big trouble. Councillor Gould, then Councillor Donaldson, then Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you for your report today, Thomas. I'll get to a question, but I'll just point out a few things before I get there. Your slides today show a deficit of $3 million up until the 31st of January. One of your slides indicating that there's you possibly get to by the 30th of June to $1 million. My question is to do with the landfill demand of 700,000, which is your present slide being shown, was. Is there a problem with the landfill? Do we need to put the prices up, or is extra landfill coming from other centres, which we've got no control over, as we've given the contract to Waste Management, and is also with the recycling, is that impacted on your $700,000, or is that just because Rotorua people are disposing of more things through their red bins?
So first of all, councillor, very good spotting. That yes, that does highlight that we're operating under a $3 million deficit. As I'll point out again, as I've constantly done, is that does not include capital subsidies, and particularly NZTA subsidies. And when we bring those back in, because we show them with our capital expenditure, we do run at a surplus and a balanced budget. So I'll just cover that one off. With regards to the refuse, unfortunately Stavros isn't here, and he'd probably be best to answer the ins and outs of it. Again, my understanding is, as we've previously communicated, is that with the change of the refuse system, a lot of other residents that had alternatives have moved back to the council service, which has increased the volumes going to the landfill, which is contributing to the cost increase. Stavros and his team is actively working with Smart Environmental and Waste Management to pull that back where possible, but that is something that we have to live with at the moment because it is down to increases in volumes.
The question is, are we as the Rotorua residents being penalised because Waste Management are bringing in outside rubbish from outside Rotorua, which is affecting the 700,000?
No, we don't. We do not pay for that, councillor.
User pay basis, Thomas?
That is correct. We only pay for the refuse that's being disposed of via the curbside collection. Yep.
Any further questions, Councillor Gould? Thank you. Councillor Donaldson?
Thank you, Mr Chair, through you, and I'd much rather see increased volumes going into the landfill than over roadsides around the district. But my question is supplementary to Councillor Rokawa Tate's question around deferments. Are we deferring recruitments or otherwise in people and capability? Are we holding vacancies as a cost-saving measure?
Yes, we are currently. Like always in any business decision, when we have a staff member leave, we constantly review the ongoing need for that position, or whether it should change, whether it should be filled, and that's just part of normal process. But so we haven't got a freeze on, but we are constantly reviewing where appropriate.
Thank you.
Councillor Hunt?
I wondered whether it was possible for that report that we got a number of years ago about the electricity pricing, whether that could be recirculated to the members, because I know with new board members around the table, the understanding of why we went to a hedging price and the background behind that, and the fact that each budget unit themselves used to have to price in their electricity expectation, which actually blew out everybody's budget, and then they had to work out what they'd actually spent. So there was a deal of philosophy behind the move, and I think that that would help to circulate. And then if there are questions that need individual answering, then they can be sought from either Mr Colley or somebody else to clarify the points. It'll just give a bit of background to understand that while the last two reports have appeared to be over, the previous all were under, and so we have banked those significant savings that otherwise would have been on the ratepayer.
I think your suggestion is well founded. Democracy Unit has said we can get that report out and maybe bring it back into the agenda at the next meeting so Mr Colley can explain the methodology and the rationale behind it, because I know Mr Starling did a huge amount of work over a 2-year period to make sure that the benefit of going to the spot market was a real one. And he actually showed me on the spot market the fluctuations by the minute of, and it was just unbelievable what was happening out there. So it was done on a reasoned basis, Mr Tulay, and if you've got further comment or question?
Just to put some context onto it, I guess the strategy still is extremely robust. It's just whether what we're experiencing now is a one-off in climate or whether that is something that is happening into the future. That is something that we need to review and obviously discuss. As an organisation, we roughly spend about $200,000 a month on electricity in a normal environment, and some months that does spike up depending on adverse weather and so forth. We pay roughly on the spot market, normal conditions, about 5.5 cents. If we were to go fix it, we'd be paying 7.7 cents or 8 cents. And so you can automatically see the cost increase that we'd have to budget for. It's been very successful in the 4 to 5 years that we've done this. We have, if we were to pay on a fixed versus what we have paid in the past, we have saved close to 3 million, if not over. I think the last time I checked was about a year ago, and we were about 2.7 million ahead of where we would have been. So we have, I guess, locked in some savings. The worst thing that can happen is obviously we experience one of these events whereby the weather has done what the weather has done, and all of a sudden we change strategy as a result. So it is important to review and very important to reevaluate. But I think, putting pressure on or thinking that we'll have a sharp change just as a result of something we've experienced like this is I think might be a bit rash.
Isn't a change in rationale. I just think it's a bit of information.
Yep.
As Councillor Hunter said, resurrecting that report because it was very well based, soundly based. If it's too big to include in the agenda, maybe as an appendix, or put it onto SALA so all members can. But thank you for your questions. Councillor Hunter, do you have any further? Okay. Thank you. Yes, Rotorua.
Are we able to get a copy of this financial verbal report ASAP, please?
Yes, I've already asked staff that we get particularly the table, because I know some of us do monitor it and keep a file on them, so I think that's important. Okay, if we could have that, Una? Yep. Okay. Right, thank you, Thomas. So, would someone like to move that the financial performance for the 7 months ended the 31st of January be received? Councillor Donaldson, Councillor Maxwell, all those in favour please say aye. Against, carried, thank you very much. So recommendation 1 on page 14, and we'd like to call forward on page, but you've got it in your, can I have a mover and a seconder to the report, operation and financial updates for Council for Infracore Limited, Rotorua Economic Development Limited, Rotorua Airport Limited and Tirax Limited partnership be received?
I'll move.
Mr Waru, seconded Councillor Hunt. All those in favour please say aye. Against, carried. I'd now like to call forward to the CCO leader for the Infracore Limited. Welcome. Thank you, Tim. And John isn't with you today, Tim. Welcome.
Thank you, and welcome. Thank you for welcome here. Apologies from John. He's out of the country at the moment, so he left me on my own to do this. So we'll proceed. Very quickly, plan to run through a summary of the report. It should only take a few minutes to run through, and then I'll open up for questions. So the first point, the key points are our financial for the results for the quarter were mixed. Our costs for the quarter are actually on plan, but we, despite having some things like additional materials spend, but we did not recover the overrun on costs from the first quarter. We've had some success in picking up work, but not as much as we planned, so we've picked up some extra contract work. There has been an increase in operational work for the council. We've had an increase in volume. It fits with, as Mr. Colley highlighted in his slide before, there has been some spike in work. That was the smaller bar on his graph, previous graph. And there's been additional minor works, a lot of it, for example, around the storms that came through. We've had a lot of tree work to do and things that has pushed us across through. But that is not expected to continue, those extra work through there. We're working with council in all areas to find ways where we can save money, cut costs, to manage to get on budgets. Stuff that we'll keep doing the critical work, as Mr. Colley said, but things that we can defer, move around, challenge whether there's a way we can deliver this that might be might be a bit slower, but a bit more cost efficient, and finding solutions around that. In other highlights, we completed our collective negotiations in the second quarter, by the end of December. We have a new field service management system has been selected and will be in place for 1st of July 2018. And we've completed the review we talked about previously of the nursery and have implemented changes. And on that point, there are a number of plants we've put on sale at the nursery where we're clearing away stock to realise funds out of that. That's items that were not previously moving, that we're offering on good prices to people to clear that away and help the nursery's performance. So in summary, the financial performance is there. You can see the core work, we're slightly overspent there, as I mentioned, because of the work volume coming through. That overspend in the other works is the one-off items that comes through. As I say, we expect that to be come back closer to budget over the rest of the year. We've done no major project work for the council this year, so there's been none in there. We have income from other sources. As I say, we have some coming in. We have project work underway. We're working in Tauranga at the moment. It's not as much as we have budgeted, so we are behind on that. Our cost overrun is primarily driven by the cost of doing some of those minor works. We've had extra contractors in, arborists to work on trees, and we've had some extra materials consumed. We're managing those back onto target, but that's about the same as it was at the end of the first quarter, so it hasn't got any worse. And the other things are close to target all over, but it means at the bottom line, we expected to be in a loss-making position at the end of the year. We are, but we're about 170,000 worse than we expected. We are looking to claw that back. We still think we'll make a profit for the year. We don't think we're going to hit our full profit target of $250,000. We'll be somewhere between 0 and $250,000. Or on capital spend, sorry, at the bottom there, part of managing cash flow and all those sort of things, we'd planned to spend by about $250,000 on plant and equipment, capital replacements. We've reined that back a bit to help manage our cash flow and expenditure in the process. Oops. Statement of intent targets. These are the 10 targets in our statement of intent. As you can see, we've got 4 currently in the red. The 2 with the asterisk by them are currently off, but we do expect them to turn back to green by year end. So we think we will still squeeze into the 2 to 8% range on profit. And our turnover, we're at 104%. As I say, we have picked up some project work. We think we'll get that over 105 by the end of the year, so we'll achieve that target. I do not think we'll recover the other 2. The ability to win project work, yes, we have a few $1 million of tenders out there at the moment. We may not pick up there. Time will tell. Those are down. They're competitive. We'll see how we go. We won the last one we went through. What will happen the next one, we don't know yet. Zero harm LTIs. We're already had enough LTIs to not be able to meet our target. We're targeting now to have none more for the rest of the year, but I don't think we're going to get down. So an LTI is a lost time injury, as somebody's been hurt in the work. We try to keep it below 1.5 per 200,000 hours worked. We're not going to achieve that for the year now, so I think that will stay red at year end. It may come down, but it won't reach the target. Key strategic actions, everything's in the green, and on the report we provided, we had actually highlighted them all in green. One on reflection should have been in red, that's the middle one, building our civil works team. One of the things we have done in managing costs, in agreement with council, some of the work that's been deferred, we've been part of deferring that work, so we've got no work for those people to do. So I've actually scaled back the team. I've managed to do that without having to let anybody go. We have used those staff to transfer into other areas to fill vacancies. So we've cut back on our recruitment to make savings. And at the moment, we've absorbed everybody from that team and scaled our activity back to very little. We're just doing some minor maintenance work now. So we're not going to build the civil team up to a commercially sustainable standard this year, but it's the right decision to do in the short term to cut that back and manage costs. So conclusion, behind budget and won't be fully recovered. I'm forecasting a reduced profit for the year. Still looking to pick up additional work, but likely to impact on next year's books if we do. Any project we pick up now probably won't flow to the end of the flow through into next year. Sorry. Statement of intent performance measures, financials and new works do expect some improvement in the year, even though we're behind at the moment. Efficiency and service targets are all looking good. Action plans is good, except for the cutback in the civil works area, which is a choice, not something that's happening to us. It's something we're choosing to do to manage the business and services to the council. And that's it.
Jim? Questions? Councillor Donaldson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Tim, thanks for your report. Just looking at page 17 of the agenda and the highlights, so congratulations on reaching a mediated agreement with the collective employment. But the next bullet point under what's happening in January, March is the issue of, I guess, and you partially answered that, your competitiveness in winning tenders and the risk, the signal you raised there about you may have to reduce staffing levels. You've partially answered that. You've diverted some staff to fill vacancies, but when will you be making that call? Is that in this January to March period? And what risks does that pose you to? Because I know you've still got some long-serving staff out there in terms of redundancy payouts. Can you answer that? Thanks.
Yes, our first option, so yes, it will be resolved or worked on during this quarter. In fact, we have worked on it, and it probably will continue right through to year end, to be honest, depending, we're looking on a weekly basis at the work we have on our books and what the forward plans are. So we are having to make cutbacks. At the moment, we have vacancies enough for everybody who's been cut back to be transferred. So we've moved people from, they were laying concrete to they're now digging water mains up, or they're involved in gardening or whatever. So we're transferring people, transferable skills as much as we can around the organisation. It is still possible that we may end up with a shortfall of work and lay people off, but I can't see it on the immediate future now. We've managed within our limits. But yes, if people do leave, there is a potential redundancy cost within our organisation. We're trying to minimise that liability, both in terms of the cost, but also the loss of knowledge from the organisation by moving people around to fill vacancies where we can. At the moment, that's worked, but that's a weekly review of that. We're also cutting, the other thing we're doing, we're looking at where we use subcontractors for some work, whether we can stop using them and keep our own people on that work. It's finely balanced at the moment, but we're coping.
On top of page 17, you've got an indication you're preparing tenders for around $2.6 million of additional work. So if those come to pass, what you just talked about, will that still eventuate, or is it a changing scene out there all the time and you've got to keep your hands on what's happening directly?
Yes, it is a changing scene, and we need to keep our hands on it directly, and it changes, can be from week to week, month to month. In terms of that work there, most of that now, and there is looking promising on a fair chunk of that 2.6 million, but it looks like the timing of that work will commence after June. So we'll have won the work, but they won't actually benefit in this financial year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Tim. Thank you for your presentation this morning. I do hope we won't have staff losses. For one person made redundant, 6 other individuals are affected, either within the immediate family or extended family. So I always hate to hear that staff might be going down the road. It's just 2 questions, if I may. I don't believe we've been overly successful in picking up project work. And I know you're out there competing and it's a competitive environment, but do you actually analyse where you have missed out? Is it strictly on price or is it something else? Because I really would like to know. And the second thing is, you did mention that there's no other major work coming from council in the near future. Were you expecting some major work coming from us to come your way? Thank you.
I'll answer the first one, but it does also cover the second one. Yes, we do analyse when we miss out on work. Our strike rate at the moment is something like 1 in 4. I'd like to get it to 1 in 3. You're never going to achieve 100%, because it is largely driven off price. In terms of where we've missed out on work, it's I'm just recalling, I think it's 100%, that because the work's awarded on lowest price. We have been frustratingly second on 4 pieces of work last year out of 4 plus parties with second place. So we're close, but no cigar for the work. And we look at, when you put a competitive tender in, you do get feedback on what the other prices were. We analyse that and see, could we have matched the leading tenderer? What would have needed to happen to match that? Can we learn something from that? And it's causing us to go to some of our suppliers for materials and subcontractors and renegotiate the rates they'll charge us to try and tighten stuff up. But it's an ongoing action. In terms of the work for council, the work we're talking about, this is stuff we would tender for off council. It's not given to us, we would win it on that basis. We've come very, very close on winning work here for council, but we came second on price. There was a piece of work earlier in the year we missed out on by a few $1,000s on a very significant piece of work, but it was quite clear the terms of the tender was lowest conforming price.
Right, so we don't, I was going to say we don't look favourably on you, but I don't mean that, but I mean you're in there with it alongside of everybody else.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I wasn't aware, yes, I presume I was, but
I'm mindful of time. I've set aside 10 minutes plus questions for each of the CCOs, otherwise we'll be here till 3 o'clock. I've got Councillor Gould, Councillor Mr Waru and Councillor Bentley and Mr Toulay. So we'll, those will be the end of the questions, and we'll move on to the second one, because them sitting here in the public gallery they should be out doing the work. Right? I mean, it's important they report to us. But sitting here for 2 to 3 hours is just not productive in my book. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Tim, thank you for your report on page 17. You've got due to lack of work books in the area's business for the next 3 months. Is that going to impact on Infocall for the next 2-3 years because of lack of work? Because do you have to change what strategy you're doing now to come back with a new strategy in 3 months' time?
It comes down to the skill set of the staff involved. If we cut things back, and I can do it by moving around some of our common skilled, lower skilled workers, they are flexible. They can go to lots of different areas and they can be easily changed and replaced. Yes, if we had to start cutting into some of our high skilled, high caliber employees, that has an ongoing effect because we lose that capability for a period of time and we have to re-recruit it in. So that is something I definitely want to try and avoid. But we would certainly no plans to do anything that would have a strategic impact, and we are very aware of checking that there is no strategic impact and how we can manage around that if it comes up as a risk.
Thank you.
Councillor, Mr Waru.
Kia ora, Mr Chair. No, it's okay. Councillor Rotorua stole my question. Kia ora.
Bentley.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm not sure if this is a question for you, Tim, or for our Chief Executive, but as I understand it, in mid-January, a contract was sent out, or an RFT for a contract 18/004 was for the water supply network sectorisation stage 6, was sent out to you and other people for tendering. Shortly before it was to close, it was withdrawn. Is this is there a reason for the withdrawing of a tender? That's a very rare occasion that it happens. No, I'm saying the council withdrew the RFT, and I want to know if it is something that you're aware of, or
in a position to answer that, Tim?
Best answered by the council.
Oh, okay.
So for you, Chair, Councillor, as we discussed last week on this matter, I pushed you towards Stavros, who was more than happy to answer those questions for you as to why we did that. My understanding for transparency was that with the financial pressures that council was under, particularly in the operating expenditure, we did make a conscious decision to not undertake some work which impacted on Infracore, and as a result we removed the tender and awarded that capital work to Infracore to make sure that overall the council and its subsidiaries and the ratepayers weren't exposed to a significantly higher costs.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you for that answer. I'm just wondering if the other people that also had the documents and preparing a tender, there's an awful lot of work. Are they going to be recompensed if they sort it?
Or recompensed for preparing a tender? Question, Mr. Colley?
Generally no, like all people that tender, if they miss out, they're not recompensed for their costs. So, but happy to talk to Stavros about the process and how it was communicated to those people that applied for that tender.
Any further questions, Councillor Bentley? Mr. Tule, you're the last question.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Page 24, around the IT systems, and it mentions the new field service management system was put in place, but also a new financial system. And in the note, it points out that Council's Tech One system was incompatible with Infracore's financial system. Can you talk a bit more about that? Right.
I haven't got the exact wording here. Incompatible is not quite the right description. We looked at the council's system in terms, it's a system designed for a council. It's not a system designed for a contracting company. So we looked at it as an option. There was going to have to be a lot of changes made to the council system to jimmy a contracting company like Infracore into it. So we looked at alternatives, and we've brought a system now that's compatible with a contracting company. We're in discussions with the council. Basically, any cost difference in that sits on our books because it's our choice.
A double up of
it's not a double up. No, it's a right horse for the right course decision.
And just the one other thing, are we able to receive it's just a little bit heartbreaking for me to hear the nursery is going to be downsized or downscaled, or is it possible to receive the report you had on the nursery, please?
It's a It's an in-house report through our board. I would need to talk with the chairman about sharing that. There is some commercially sensitive information in there, so I suspect it would need to be appropriately.
Poto, I think he's having difficulty answering it because we employ a board to oversee these matters and make business decisions within the CCO itself. Any difference in the operation, he reports back to us, and he has. They've done the review of the nursery, and there's no major issues or alterations. And as I read it, so I think that's the process.
Yeah, just for me, I think the nursery is a much loved community asset, and I think we're going to field a lot of questions, and I would rather be informed beforehand. I know that Infracore is a separate body to ours, but for the sake of information sharing, it would be really
Tim,
helpful.
Would you like to respond?
Yeah, we are actively speaking with Rob Ketley and his team around that, making sure in terms of their expectations around the nursery, they are factored in and taken into account. So perhaps the best route would be a summary of that conversation.
I see a way clear, Otawa, that can come through in Rob Ketley's operation monitoring report next round, because you'll see we're changing in terms of doing CCOs 1 month and the operation the next month, so that our meetings don't go on till 5 o'clock at night. But thank you for your question, it was very good. Would someone like to move that the Infracore report? Oh, I've got that. The next one is the Rotorua, thank you, Tim. The Rotorua Economic Development Limited, Michelle Templer. Welcome, Michelle. And we'll get Michelle to refer to her presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Welcome, Michelle.
Morena tātou. For the presentation, through the chair, I didn't want to repeat what was already in the report. Yeah, so I just want to go through a couple of highlights and then actually give you some insights on how those measures actually translate into meaningful outcomes. So I guess a few highlights. Definitely the Rotorua economy is continuing to perform well. Growth remains above national average. These measures are monitoring measures for us, and I guess really important for us that these measures help us understand whether we're actually having an impact and making a difference. Retail spending in particular was ongoing growth, which I think you can see in the vibrancy in the CBD. Recent articles showing some of the lowest vacancy rates, which is fantastic. Councillor Kent's not here, but was really keen to report too. We've been doing some research and insights information on agricultural share of GDP. I know people here are aware of the importance of tourism, but it is notable that agricultural share of GDP in Rotorua is 5% compared with the national average of 3.4%. Our dairy payouts increasing as well. Probably for us as a team around attracting skills and talent, a good indicator is that the value of houses increased, but equally one of those compelling reasons for people moving is affordable housing, so up by 13%. Commercial accommodations were up and mainly driven on domestic growth, and that's a particularly important measure for us when we look at the partnership with the tourism industry around domestic campaign, famously Rotorua. Attractions, that's major attractions, also a good percentage growth and activities, and again, fairly balanced portfolio of domestic and international visits. These figures are for December, reporting through to December. They're particularly good given that December actually weather-wise was a bit patchy. And we've been working with a lot of operators who anecdotally have said that partly with changes in the school year, they were quite concerned around cash flow in what traditionally December's been a very busy month. What we're seeing is the season moving later, so really strong performance coming through for February and particularly March. Domestic in particular, as I mentioned, has been our real strength for us with growth around 15%. And our perception research shows as well that increasingly people in the North Island are putting Rotorua in their sort of top two to four consideration places to come and visit. And not just families, a big range of people wanting to come and relax, engage with the natural environment. So overall total visitor spend up 9.9%. And the last one, the New York Times naming Rotorua in the top 45 places in the world to visit. Yes, it's the New York Times, but it's really interesting the response it got in New Zealand, positive and negative. I guess the downside was we had some media interviews that basically were really top 45 in the world, Rotorua. So it was a great opportunity to remind people what a fantastic place we are to visit. Financial management, again, we've had some challenges. So our operating income has been down. That's mostly due to reduced trading revenue and sundry revenue. That's been partially offset by lower costs. We've had an ongoing drive to reduce costs and prioritise expenditure. The budget constraints have put pressure on delivery, and I'm sure councillors will understand that given the reduced revenue, we have had to recognise that and basically make changes so that we are able to achieve a balanced budget at year end. Having said that, we're currently trading in surplus, but that partly reflects just the sequence. We don't undertake a lot of activity around the high season when Rotorua is busy, and the majority of our expenditure and activities fall actually in the February through to May period. We'll be continuing to review ongoing spending. How we're tracking, the detailed tables in your report, but we have the majority of our measures on track. We have a very large number of measures. Where it says no data available, that's because those figures are provided either by MB or Statistics New Zealand or through research and are done annually. So we have third-party provision of those reports. A number of priorities. So one in particular is to work with a number of sectors, including Rotorua Lakes Council, on accessing the Provincial Growth Fund. The fund isn't just a big bucket of money, and it's incredibly important that any approaches to that fund are, done in a considered way. So we're working with a number of sectors to provide insights and information. Just yesterday we had some good progress on forestry, and so we'll be also working on the Waka Forest and waterfront developments with Rotorua Lakes Council to look at central government support for those. Business development, we're working quite closely with Alibaba. We're having international education as an area that we haven't really engaged with actively, and our market insights. More importantly, our strategic actions report. So the destination management part is critical to ensuring that the destination maintains its competitive advantages. So one piece of work we're looking forward to reporting back finally to Council on is the high value visitors, and that reflects strategically our focus on value over volume. So I've just put the framework up there, but the phase one of that report's been completed, and what it's showing is we've got incredible natural assets and opportunity in this area, but the infrastructure that supports attraction of high value visitors is likely to need some investment. For the forestry sector, we've been working closely with MPI regarding the relocation of the Forest Service. I just want to show you the sorts of information we're providing. So we've put together information for MPI and stakeholders, which really articulate why Rotorua should be the absolute heart of the location of that operation. And we're very pleased to see that that has come to fruition. Forestry and wood processing, 15% of Rotorua's GDP. Again, it's quite hard to read, but some of the business case was around the volume of plantation forest in the central North Island. And then also the location of those value add opportunities. So we put together a comprehensive piece of information for MPI, and that's just an example of what that looks like. On destination management, one of the things identified by Terry Stevens was our service quality and how we told our story. So also fantastic that Manaki's been launched. The Manaaki program is a service module, and that's been, and we were initial funders with the Hospitality Institute, and we're working in partnership with Māori and Tourism, Rotorua, and also the Chamber to get that out to people. They're going to be online learning modules, and we'll be really encouraging people to take up the opportunity to partake in those. Business insights. So this has been, again, a real challenge to help facilitate business growth, relocation of talent, but also investment. So we've put up a dashboard which is interactive, and it will run across our website. The Insights dashboard, all of the charts are actually interactive, and I apologise, it's quite hard to read. But it'll have things like employment growth increase in sectors so that people can quickly see what's happening there. It'll also have information, business information on the number of people relocating. The bottom right-hand corner, featured jobs available. It'll have a Strava heat map so you can see where people are mountain biking at any time, as well as news articles. We'll have some sectoral information, so again, forestry and wood processing, so you'll be able to quickly go and look at if you want the K-log price, as well as forest areas and wood processing, as well as other information. It's been a fairly major piece of work, and we believe it's one of the first in New Zealand for a regional economic development agency. Doesn't want to go anymore. It's probably a hint. Can I just ask that we click forward? So wayfinding is another project, and talent and international student attraction, as I mentioned. Wayfinding in particular, we've got a number of initiatives which focus on how we move people around the destination to commercial opportunities. And then lastly, the famously Rotorua campaign refresh is just about to start rolling out. So we're particularly pleased in working in partnership with Rotorua Airport Limited that will be putting the Famously magazine into Wellington, where it's never been before. And the new campaign is very much around epic shots, focusing on the natural beauty, as well as first person, as well as people in the moment. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I have one question in particular with forestry. I'm delighted the engagement with MPI is ongoing, because have you at this stage got any indication of the number of jobs that relocating New Zealand Forest Service to Rotorua, in particular I'm keenly interested in the training and job opportunities that are going to be provided for our rangatahi, our young people, and whether we're getting the support from Te Oho Mai with increasing their capacity so that our locals benefit from this relocation. And I just wondered whether you had engagement with the Minister concerned, and how enthusiastic is he to see Rotorua coming to fruition, because I thought that decision had already been made that it was coming to Rotorua, so I'd be interested in your feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the decision was made, but there was still quite a lot of discussion about where that will be located. But at this stage, it's not going to be the decoupling of a big piece of the Ministry of Primary Industries. That's still being worked through. So at this stage, our understanding is it's an initial foundation group of people, so in the order of below 10, so not 30, 40, 50. And MPI is still working out where they wish that site to be located within Rotorua. But there is positive signs that from that initial start that they are looking to grow. On education, Education certainly is a critical part, and through the Bay of Connections, which is the regional entity, and the Forest Wood Action Group, which has been led by Bryce Hurd. Bryce and FWAG have done some excellent work on identifying the strategic priorities, and we'll be working from a regional perspective to identify those things that will go through to Provincial Growth Fund funding. And one of those is likely to be some collaboration around educational opportunities, and certainly industry and Toi Oho Mai. And the fund does have a real focus on translating that investment into jobs and social outcomes.
Used to hear that because there have been some horror stories relayed to me that students have been bused to Tauranga to take part in courses, and I certainly don't want this being the heart of forestry, that those courses are relocated to Tauranga. Now people are being bussed over. I understand our nurses' courses, they're all jumping on a bus every morning to go to their courses in Tauranga, and I think that is not in the spirit of what we thought Te Oho Mai was all about. So I've got questions from Mr. Tule.
Mr. Chair, kia ora Michelle, and awesome report, especially around the wood forestry. Ooh, well done. A comment in the public was, we've recently had 3 global CEOs relocate home back to Rotorua, and they've noticed that there's lots of push to attract overseas people, but really nothing to focus on the local talent we have at home. So it's more like, how have you been unlocking the potential right under our feet? And similarly, the numbers of tracked visitors is all about international people, tourists, yet most of these initiatives are paid for by the ratepayer. So the question I've also been asked are, how are local residents tracked around movement and engagement throughout our city? Because we feel, well, the comment I got was they felt like most of the emphasis has been on international, let's go and get the big guys. But we've got a lot of talent here, and we've got a lot of movement and activity here, but no one seems to know the figures, and no one seems to know. Why are we rolling out the red carpet to foreigners when we've got people here with the same, if not better skills, and they don't feel like that same treatment being afforded to locals? So just a comment.
Michelle?
I think all our talent attraction, none of that's been directed offshore. So it is all around, promoting what jobs are locally available here on the Insights dashboard. And I guess one of the things is feedback we've had is not only attracting people to the destination, but also, as you state, retention of talent here, so that people feel really confident that this is a place that's on a journey going somewhere, and that there are opportunities here for them, so they don't have to look further afield. But thank you, it's good feedback.
How are the local resident numbers being tracked? Is there a similar model to how to international tourists, or are locals just, are we just here?
No.
Do we just pay for it and we're just here?
No. So I think all the destination management projects, we've always said that destination management isn't just about making the destination great for visitors. It's actually making a destination the sort of place that people want to live, work, play and study. And that's for residents and visitors. So if it's a great place to visit, it's often a great place to live as well. But live is at the heart of it. And we certainly track our population figures and growth in the population.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Michelle, for your report this morning. When you talk about commercial accommodation up 6.1% and domestic visitors up 15%, is that because of more conferences and more events being held in Rotorua in the last year to push those numbers up? And I've got another question after that.
Yes, it is actually, because 96% of our business delegates are actually come from domestic, and they tend to stay in commercial accommodation. These figures don't pick up people staying at in the shared economy, so Airbnb or Book a Batch. So the increase in domestic, we are causally linking to an increase in business events.
Okay, and my second question is, on your first slide, you indicated that the dairy output for the Rotorua was 313 million. I take it that's for the Rotorua area, but you didn't mention about cattle or sheep farming. So, you know, those farmers do exist as well.
Yes, as a sheep and beef farmer myself at Crane. Also important. It is interesting that dairy plays on from an economic point of view quite strongly. The forestry and logging is the biggest, followed by dairy, cattle, then agriculture, forestry and fishing support services and hunting. Support services around hunting, then sheep, beef cattle and grain farming in that order. But certainly on the Insights dashboard, there'll be information on dry stock farming as well.
Thank you, Michelle, for your great report. I have three questions. One is, since the launch of Manaaki, and that was only on the 20th, are you aware of the uptake of that at this point?
Yes, that was just an initial launch. The actual program itself will be rolling out in April.
That's right. Sorry, I do remember that now, so thank you for that. The second was the InstaTrail project. Could you explain a little bit around that, and is that something we can download ourselves to have a look at?
Yeah, apologies, I was mindful of the time, so I'm skipping through. The InstaTrail project is just a small pilot project, and that's actually putting an InstaTrail map, and the intention of that is to encourage disbursement of people around the destination, not just visitors, but also locally, that people understand what incredible, beautiful sites we have. We do have a commercial target on that to connect people to commercial opportunities, because a lot of our retail and tourist sites are actually just outside the CBD. So at the next meeting, I'm happy to present that, an update on that.
Okay, yeah, because I'm most interested particularly in the user-generated content, because that will give us a very clear idea of, particularly within the city, of where are the most visited and photographed places. The final question was, in the March New Zealand magazine, we have a wonderful two-pager on places to eat in Rotorua, and I wondered, do you initiate that with Air New Zealand, or do they initiate that themselves? It's a great two-pager.
Yes, we work closely on the Kia Ora magazine. We also had a multi-page feature on things to do in the evening, nighttime experiences, which was really well received. So places to eat was a key focus to change perception that you can't get great food and great coffee in Rotorua, and the reality is you definitely can.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair, just a few questions. Kia ora, Michelle, tēnā koe. First question, and I know it might sound so simple, but you've given us a whole lot of information about what you're doing in this sector, that sector, that sector. I have an interest in the tourism sector myself, so quite connected in that area. But I was just wondering, what's your view? What is the primary role of Destination Rotorua? Because you do a hell of a lot. First question.
First question. So I think most of our work is focused on three key areas. I guess one thing to point out is on economic development, strategically we are led by the councils and councillors' view. So a core focus is to provide intelligence and insights and a platform and ecosystem that supports business development and investment attraction. Second is definitely destination management, including the promotion of the destination. the reality is a core part of our funding goes to the operations of running our visitor centres, but we see those very connected to success of the tourism industry. And I think lastly is increasingly we see a role in being a guardian of the Rotorua brand and profiling and supporting investment and vibrancy in the destination.
Kapo, thank you, because I know there's quite a few people that watch online now and they're not quite sure because you do so many different things, so I'll just sort of ask that. The second question I had was the Manaaki Rotorua program. Is there a link to the Rotorua Reorua program that's coming up, or is there a possibility to link?
Yeah, it's a significant link that will be in there. One of the key things about that program is to make sure that our frontline people are trained and aware of our stories here, but also in basic pronunciation. So the project's being led by Oscar Nathan, and I know Oscar's working really closely with a number of people to make sure that those stories and reo reo is a core component of it.
One last, it's not a question, it's more of a suggestion there. Those images up there, to me, kaorea with te tino kite I Rotorua. So, I think I might have mentioned it sometime back in another meeting that, with a hub of wakaama as well and things like that. So just a little bit of a kōrero just to say, it'd be nice to see some real Rotorua images, wahe waka, bicultural, tata, kia ora.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, it's a bit of a supplementary question, Michelle, regarding talent retention, and also supplementary to the question from Mr. Biasini Tuli around the reality of talent availability in Rotorua. So at business networking events, I've been approached by two employers, and it's around immigration policy, and this is policy from the previous government. They're both losing staff on work visas who are being sent home, and they can't replace those staff. And one of these employers, major painting and decorating business, he's had a vacancy open for a month over January for a qualified painter decorator with one application from a Japanese guy on a work visa living in Rotorua who didn't sort of have a long-term future from his perspective. So what's your understanding of the issues that employers are facing and immigration policy? Is that having an effect on talent retention in Rotorua?
Well,
Don't know if you can answer it, actually.
Well, it is a real challenge. Actually, our unemployment figures were up just in the latest receipt information. So we definitely have some significant challenges that against the national average, our unemployment rate has gone up. And yet, certainly from a business's perspective, they are still saying to us that they are really struggling to get skills and availability of workers, particularly here in the hospitality. But we've also recently been having some comprehensive discussions around forestry and availability of people to actually plant the trees. It's hard work and doesn't always suit everyone. So I'll probably take it as something that we're certainly looking at. I'm not sure I can answer fully. Our role in actually addressing that is still to focus on the retention and attraction of people here and working in partnership with organisations like Toi Oho Mai to make sure we're connecting business with training for the future rather than just maybe immigration to address that gap.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much, Michelle. Best wishes for the next 3 months. I'd now like to call on Mark Gibb from the Rotorua Airport Limited. Welcome, Mark, and refer you to page 39.
ora everyone. What I'd like to do is I've pulled together a brief presentation of the activity at the airport for the last 3 months, and I'll give you again a forward view for the ensuing 3 months. The key message at this point is we're continuing to progress on a range of fronts within the architectural framework of our statement of intent. As a general comment, we've had very positive progress across all elements of the commercial and aviation and operational elements of the business. So I'll step you through the key highlights. Now, the first point is from a financial perspective, we've got a positive variation of about $380,000 on budget. So we're running a surplus year to date at month 6 of $367K versus a forecast deficit of 16.2. Apologies, I'll just bring that slide up for you. Passenger movements, we're up on budget again at 121,000 versus 120 budget. I've noted within the deck also that we have hit our highest passenger movements on an annualised basis through the airport over the last 10 years and the last 12 months. So it's great to be back and moving very close towards that target of 250,000 movements. Aircraft movements again are up, 3,499 versus 3,304. One of the key contributors to that has been a general upsurge in the general aviation sector. So for those of you that spend a wee bit of time at the airport, general aviation has been a big contributor. The other is around private jet services coming into Rotorua. So we've had a number of high net worths coming in and aircraft that are generally chartered out of the States, Asia and Australia. The positive thing is those aircraft are spending quite a bit of time at the airport and transiting their customers to Auckland, Queenstown, back to Rotorua. So that's a sector of the market that we're working very hard to develop. If you look at the net equity position, that's fairly consistent quarter to quarter at $30 million, and how we derive that effectively is the value of the airport assets around $45 million. We have a term loan with the council of $15 million. Just for clarity on that number, we're not forecasting a principal payment against the term loan through to 30th of June, but we forecast a further payment of $600,000 in the FY19 year. Also noting, in terms of our cash facilities, we're now holding, as a result of, I suppose, a positive operating surplus, we're holding a term deposit of $1.7 million within the papers. That's now been increased to $2.4 million. The relevance of that number is it enables us, as we're stepping into, and I'll touch on this very shortly, stepping into a redevelopment phase, as a significant amount of that work will be funded from cash reserves as opposed to reliance on debt. So, in general terms, that's a positive position to be in. In terms of commercial activity, sort of 4 key points there. Firstly, the fire station. I've touched on this previously. The existing fire station has a DEE or an I at a lesser level, a seismic rating of 20% new building standard. That's a critical piece of infrastructure from an airport perspective. So as on Monday next week, potentially earlier, that building will be demolished and we enter into a phase of redevelopment, which is about a 26-week program in which a new fire and operations facility will be built on pretty much exactly the same footprint as the existing station. That building will be built obviously to 100% new building standard, bringing with it, from a business continuity perspective, an enhanced framework around essential airport telecommunications and operational capacity. Again, experience has shown in a major event and disaster, an airport is an absolute go-to asset. And it's critically important from our perspective that we have an ability to operate robustly through that type of event. That contract has been let to Mara at a number of just on $1.3 million. In terms of the terminal redevelopment, again, we're stepping through that nicely. As I alluded to in the last update, We are dealing with a scenario potentially in which domestic passengers will be screened out of Rotorua, and that will be a national initiative driven by aviation security across all airports in New Zealand that are operating twin prop services. At the moment, that screening ostensibly relates to jet services throughout New Zealand. So what it does is it changes the dynamic and the configuration of the space within the terminal very significantly, in the sense that we need to provide a sterile lounge, scanning facilities front of house, and scanning facilities for hull storage baggage. So schematically, we've come up with a couple of options that I will step through the board over the ensuing weeks. The key message I would put out there is the original budget that we'd set it at $4.8 million. The view of management and of the board is we're still working within that frame. Whilst there may be some additional costs pertaining to screening, our general view at this point in time is that we will still deliver the project within that framework. Master plan. The master plan for the airport has gained some traction in the last 3 months. So one of my key focuses from a CE's perspective is really around how we generate income and how that income generation will facilitate a position into the future in which the airport is not reliant on council funding. So the way in which we can do that is we are blessed with a very large land footprint at 104 hectares. The runway itself and operational areas around the runway take up around 45% of that land area, around about 46.5 hectares, which means we have just over 50 hectares of land that can be developed from an aeronautical perspective. So I will touch on a quick plan shortly that just starts to indicate the overall strategic intent and thinking behind the master plan. And the last point is, as an airport, and you will note this from other airports around the country, is we don't just rely on aviation activity, and this sort of segues into my previous comment on the master plan. We have around about 50 other leases across the airport. We're stepping through a process at the moment of ensuring that the way those leases are documented is consistent. And at the same time ensuring that all the rents that are being derived off those leases are consistent with market levels. And so again, that's a big focus, as well as reviewing and going hard on operating expenditure. The other side of it is ensuring that we have a focused and structured process around revenue growth. So just to show you what the fire station looks like, and unfortunately, no matter how you design a fire station, it always looks like a fire station. But the fireys that we have at the airport, and I'm fortunate to have a fantastic group of staff working for me. This is the bee's knees from their perspective. So effectively it has an operational area on the ground floor, management and meeting offices, and 2 bays for the fire engines that we run, together with supplementary rescue vehicles at the far end. So it's a fairly basic and frugal structure, but it will functionally do the job from our perspective. The master plan. So I don't intend to get into too much detail on this, but I would say being involved in master plans for a big chunk of my career, they do rely on a significant phase of socialisation at a public level. So from our perspective, once we lay out what we believe to be a commercially viable and deliverable master plan, interface with the community at all levels, and I say that from an iwi, from a statutory planning, from a general public and consultative perspective, is incredibly important to ensure that people understand the vision and what we're endeavouring to do. So there's 3 key precincts on that. Firstly, if I can sort of direct you to the top area, adjacent to the lake. So the area around the edge of the lake, outside the airport fence, just for a point of relevance, 50% of that area is about to be vested Ngāti Kaupoko, as part of a Treaty of Waitangi settlement, and the balance of that will become a reserve area. In behind that, there's a sector that's been established from we're looking to establish as an aviation flight training area. That will broaden our ability to generate incremental air traffic off the runway. At the present time, we move around about 6,200 movements a year off the airport. We have in excess of $30 million of runway sitting there that's extensively underused. If you looked at a comparative profile of other airports and the number of flights they move, Hamilton would be a good example. They're moving in excess of 100,000 movements a year. So we are simply not tapping the potential of our asset base at the present time. I'm certainly not suggesting we're targeting and moving 100,000 flights, but something in between would make a lot more commercial sense. So that's number one. The second precinct, there's some small yellow boxes to the right-hand side of the terminal. Again, an enhanced focus around building a stronger and more robust general aviation precinct. And for those that don't know, we actually have a grass runway that runs in parallel with the existing concrete bar asphalt runway that is immediately in front of those hangars. And then the third area out to the left, which has a series of pink and red boxes in it. Again, as I've previously indicated, we've had significant activity and growth out of the rental cars aspects of what's occurring on the airport. So we're looking to build significantly enhanced facilities for them. And again, that will bring with it a range of peripheral and other activities. And to the southern end of that block, again, we will look to open up access through stub taxiways to the runway. And again, a series of compatible industrial and commercial activities that you'd normally find within an airport precinct. So that's really a first cut. Again, from experience, these things do tend to change. As we step through the design process and through consultation, there will be a number of changes, both visually and strategically, in terms of how we move forward with the master plan. From our perspective, the next three steps will be around building a project plan, which is really around a timeline, building an approach around how we deliver it from a consultancy perspective, and most importantly, we're building a robust commercial assessment, which is really the nuts and bolts from a revenue and operational expense perspective around delivery of the project. So that's the master plan, but you will hear a lot more from me about this as we step forward in ensuring presentations. So just moving towards the back end of it, from an operational perspective, again, I noted earlier that we had a record for the last 10 years at 241,000 passenger movements. We've had very positive performance across all passenger sectors. That's Christchurch, Wellington and Auckland. Air New Zealand into April will release a new schedule that covers those three sectors, and there'll be some announcements made by Air New Zealand on increased flight services that will come with that, but I will leave Air New Zealand to make those comments. We've had strong on-time performance. Again, that's a key barometer in terms of how we monitor the success. And again, from a Rotorua perspective, we are, whilst we're blessed in having a lake at our doorstep, we also encounter significant fog and inclement weather conditions from time to time. But again, December was a record for us in which we had a record-breaking number of commercial flights running at 271. And we only had 4 cancellations off the top of that. So with some challenging conditions, we also go through phases in which we have great performance. 537 GA movements, again, highest since 2012. And the last point is we've undertaken, from a safety perspective in liaison with Airways, a number of enhancements around runway and apron remarking. Just looking going forward, just the last slide. So as you'll be aware, under the Local Government Act, we conduct our operations in accordance with a statement of intent. So we have an obligation to provide the SOI to Council by 1 March each year. So that has been provided and is currently in play with Council at the present time for review and feedback, in which we look to adopt that for the ensuing 3-year period commencing 1 July 2018. We're going through an update of the fair value assessment of the airport. That effectively is a detailed valuation exercise. The reason for that is if we breach 10% over the transfer value of the airport, we need to allow or make greater allowances from a depreciation perspective. So that potentially can impact in the way in which we establish the financial framework for how we run the airport. So we're getting on the front foot with that exercise that should be completed within the next 6 weeks. RESA, runway end safety area. Some of you may have seen through a case that went to the Supreme Court in Wellington. The New Zealand Pilots Association challenged the runway safety ends for Wellington Airport. So what they're related to is general global best practice is a runoff of 240 metres either end of the runway. Wellington doesn't have that. The cost to build that in Wellington was estimated at about $1 million a linear metre to build out into the sea. But the broader consequence is with the decision made in a general directive back to the Civil Aviation Authority is that all airports around the country will need at a point in time to provide a runway safety end of 240 metres either end. Now from our perspective, the northern end of the runway, we're fairly safe. The southern end of the runway, which taps down to Lee Road, we potentially would need to look at an extension of the grassed area down there. Positively, that end is currently running through an offer-back process through NZTA via the property group. So as an acquiring authority, we will, and we have expressed an interest in acquiring several lots that will enable us to effectively future-proof our operations by acquiring those as part of an offer-back. We'll look to enhance the airport master plan. Again, the master plan really sets a development frame for us for the next 20 years. Terminal design, the sterile lounges that I've talked about will be socialised and signed off by Aviation Security and Air New Zealand. Flight sector development, again, a big focus for us going forward, working with the likes of Michelle and her team. We're looking to bring on board specific support around, again, growing activity and continuing to grow activity through Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch. As I've stressed previously, it's not a passive approach in which we simply sit here and wait for people to turn up. It's a platform on which we've got to be very aggressive to ensure that Rotorua keeps getting its fair share. And the last point is the rail website. For those that have been onto the website, it's antiquated. It's not customer friendly, so we've gone through a complete rebuild of that, which will provide far more information, more contemporary imagery, and updated information in respect of flight movements, etc. So sorry, there's a wee bit there, but I've tracked through it as quickly as I can, and very happy to take questions.
I'm going to take questions from Councillor Okawate, Councillor Donaldson, Councillor Gould, and then we'll move to the TRX CCO. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I guess, Mark, the sterile lounge requirement couldn't have come at a better time if it was going to come at all in the middle of your redesign. Can you give us an indication of how many jobs within AVSEC that might bring to Rotorua?
Yes, Councillor, I can't be specific. Look, I've got a fair understanding in terms of the numbers, but I think that information, together with when aviation security potentially would come to Rotorua, is relatively sensitive from their perspective. So, look, as soon as I can disclose that information, I will. But look, it's fairly substantive. Aviation security's involvement would not just relate to screening of baggage, it also relates to significantly enhanced services around airport, landside, airside, perimeter protection, and a number of other security measures across the airport.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you for the presentation. I've made for good reading or good listening, and particularly I have to say around the master plan, the development of the master plan, and your focus at some stage on the socialisation through good and early communication of that master plan. I think that's great. Just a question, and it is, Mark, in relation to the leases and the review that you're undertaking. Are we very much behind the 8 ball on those leases in terms of market rental, or are we pretty much okay in that regard?
Yeah, Yes, look, setting leases is always an interesting conversation within an airport environment. So I think one of the keys that I've taken out of the review is some inconsistency around how you should assess a lease within an airport environment, because it's very difficult to get comparative data. So as part of that process, it's going to be essential from our perspective to ensure we've got absolute clarity with our occupiers, and the process that we take within Rotorua Airport is consistent with practice across all other airports within New Zealand. It would be fair to say we have a degree of variation there. But from my perspective, it's really around consistency and fairness. Don't get me wrong, we're certainly not using this as an opportunity to ramp rents. But I would say the flip side of that is we're not there to offer a concessionary rental arrangement either. It's got to be down the middle.
Mr Chairman, thank you for your report today, Mark. I'm quoting from our page 41. You've admitted today that there's 4 flights have been cancelled in your presentation. You've got your aircraft movements over budget, an increase of 200 flights, which have you got an extra permanent flight coming in and leaving Rotorua every single day for that number to be increased?
Yeah, certainly, Councillor. The general upsurge in flight movements is driven by the general aviation sector, not domestic passenger services. So, look, again, I would rather not disclose Air New Zealand's intent going forward. They do run a summer and a winter schedule. The winter schedule will be released very shortly, and there will be some positive enhancements for Rotorua coming out of that process. Over December, we did have incremental flights come into the schedule. There were days, in fact, through January, which we were up to 5 flights a day out of Christchurch simply to cater with demand. So, the positive message here is we were getting high bookings and we're getting strong load factor. Air New Zealand are building additional capacity into the schedule, which is great.
Thank you. Just a quick one on a quick question. The master plan you showed us, any of the activities on the far side towards the shore, where is the access going to come from there? I couldn't see it on the map.
Yes, very good question, Councillor. So we're working through several options on that, basically. And the simplest way to explain it is you can go under the runway or you can go around the runway. So we're not closed to any of those at the present time. Each of those has a very different profile from a cost perspective and from a consenting and from a community consultation perspective. So the key thing at this stage with the master plan is no option has been shut down. It's very wide, and what we're looking to do is effectively to go through and tease out elements like that. But traffic access and connectivity to the airport are incredibly important. Obviously there's pressures on Tanai Road at the present time in a range of other areas, and from our perspective, we will certainly be lobbying through the LTCCP and through broader regional forums to ensure that those roadways and access ways to and from the airport can facilitate our growth. It's absolutely essential.
Thank you.
Just a short one. The airport land has a really strong and long history with the local hapu, and like with the Kaikatea just that one side and the marae. But the new development, which iwi have you been talking to?
We've been talking to Uniko Kopako. So in actual fact, I was out on the land as recently as Tuesday for a couple of hours with Neraha Paraka and Ralph Mosen, in which we've had a broader conversation. So again, just to frame how we see that relationship going forward, is we're very keen, as they are, as to work into an MOU. So we've established a framework around that. Part of that will be the master plan, part of it's around employment opportunities. There's a whole range of different fronts which we're looking to enhance that relationship on. It's critically important that the flavour of that MOU comes through in the master plan, and I say that in terms of urban design, in terms of streetscape, we've got initiatives around bilingual signage that we'll bring forward this year. There's impacts, more broadly outside Rotorua. The impacts on Macora, et cetera, et cetera. It's, it's complex, but that's where we're starting.
Happy with the relationship between yourself and the local manawhina?
It's started. It's a long game. So look, it's not. I don't believe it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I say that from the point of view. If I dial it back to the way that the land was acquired at Rotorua, and I've done a lot of reading around this issue, is that it was a wee bit messy. And I think there's, it's essential that we build a high degree of trust if we're to have a positive relationship going forward. So part of that is around disclosure of what we're looking to do, and where possible to look at forming a participatory relationship on a range of fronts.
Thank you.
But it provides a unique opportunity. I certainly don't see it as a burden. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us.
Excellent attitude. Mr. Martin.
Mr. Chairman, my question is to CCO. Has the Rotorua Airport directors put a submission into the long-term plan?
We are just in the midst of pulling that together
Apart
at the
from the
present
master
time.
plan, yeah.
Yes, no, it'll be a broader submission, and we'll certainly talk to issues such as transportation as part of that.
Is there anything going in concerning the commercial land?
Not at this stage. I suppose we've, well, look, directly and indirectly there will be. It's more broadly as through Plan Change 10 and a range of other forums, we've participated in that process. There will be a general position that that we need to ensure that our development aspirations and the provision of infrastructure, et cetera, to and from the airport can be calibrated and considered as part of a forward-thinking long-term capital program. So we're working through the wording and the approach we take, but that will be the spirit of what we try and represent through that submission.
Thank you. Chairman, may I address the Chair? My question, I might like to follow on if I could, please. We've got growth in Rotorua right at the moment, but we still can't put anything in the commercial area out at the airport. There's no one coming along saying, hey, we want to build there. When Hamilton were in the same situation, the Hamilton Airport Board, along with the, I think it was the city as well, they actually formed a company for development, and it was called the Platinum Company.
Titanium Park Limited.
And the Platinum Company, sorry, thank you for that, actually did the resource consents. And they put the resource consent in when you purchased, and it said what you could do in there so that the new people coming in to purchase land or rent the land didn't go through the arduous situation of having to go and notify resource consents. And that was at the airport. It's been very successful, and I believe while we've got growth now, it's time that the council and councillors started to talk with the CEO and saying, hey, do you want to do this? Because the biggest stumbling block of the whole lot with that airport is that resource consents in heights, etc. That's what the council should be leading into.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor, Mr. Martin. I think, Mark, in terms of your relationship building at the airport with Atiuna Kopako and Rangaterere and the master plan that Councillor Rakawa commented on, I think you're starting to tick the boxes in terms of us seeing a huge future and the potential that Councillor Mr. Martin just talked about in working in partnership in a can-do attitude is the way forward. So thank you for your presentation, and Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but it's got to be this council that drives it, not the board.
No, that's right.
Yeah, it's look. Thank you very much for the comment. I think it's absolutely very well stated. I would say that that thus far, in starting to socialise the airport master plan and having a look at the statutory planning framework that sits in behind, we've had fantastic support from officers within council. They've been nothing but supportive. So, I think the key for us in ensuring that that we have a successful master plan and it's clear and it's commercially viable and successful for Rotorua, that we all need to be pulling in the same direction.
Mark, in your socialisation, can you also not forget Rotorua School, because they played a major part
Yes,
when we
yes.
extended the runway, etc. And
Yes,
we
yes.
didn't realise some of the impacts that would have on them.
Yes.
And their submissions were very, very valuable. So please don't forget the Rotorua School board. Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate your time and best wishes with the challenges you've got ahead, which are quite exciting. Next presentation is from T-Rex Limited Partnership. We will be breaking for lunch at 12 o'clock, people, if we don't get through our agenda, because it's not fair on the staff who prepare it for it to go off. Let's put it that way. It's not their fault that it is, it's our fault. So welcome, Brian, and the team from T-Rex. I'll refer you all to page 49. Welcome, gentlemen. We have got a copy of your quarterly review report. If you could just highlight some of the areas that you want council to be further aware of, we'd be delighted. And if you could answer some questions towards the end.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much, Chair. Brian and I will play a bit of a tag team, and taking on your advice there that we will take the report as read. I'll provide an update on the key actions over the last period, and that will be quite brief. And then as part of our tag team, Brian will answer your questions. So just quite quickly, I guess the key areas we are focusing on, and the key update is that we are continuing to focus on securing the development and construction of a demonstration plant. And as you know from my previous reports and Brian's previous reports, we have been focusing globally on that. The other area where we have made a pivot, as it were, is actually now focusing on securing investment from financial investors to underpin the business plan that's being developed. So as you know, that since the council made the decision not to construct a T-Rex operation in the short term, so our focus has been to secure that demonstration plant elsewhere. We know that this is a key value uplift step, and if achieved, will give you a very substantial return on your historic investment to date. We have several interest parties in play, and that gives us confidence that we know we are in a good place, but also it is a matter, as always, around timing for these type activities. And there's no doubt that globally, and even in New Zealand now, the focus on environmental considerations is very, very high. We are also aware that one of the major challenges for the T-Rex operation, although it hits all the key points required for this application, is really around capital cost. And also going back to the previous briefings, we have been, a substantial organisation has invested in T-Rex to actually do a value engineering exercise for an operation in India. And that is progressing, and we'll be expecting to hear a bit more about that a bit later on in the year. We are also getting a degree of encouragement in terms of the way that capital cost is starting to move when you start to bring in some of these key international players. In terms of investment to underpin our plan moving forward, and you would excuse me if we are a little bit vague around numbers and individuals. We appreciate that this is a public forum and there is some extreme sensitivities around some of these matters. You're probably aware, or will be now, the Scion board is basically advised that they are keen to limit their investment moving forward, and that is contingent upon a clear line of sight to the demonstration plant or to actually securing other investment coming in place. Your management have advised us similarly, and we're very comfortable with that position. That does give us a runway of a relatively limited period to actually address this, hence the reason we have really seriously increased our activities around securing financial investment. We have not requested a further cash injection from either yourselves or Scion accordingly. Instead, as I say, pursuing the financial investors, and that's happening now. The impact, of course, on that, it will be a reduction in equity for both parties, but we would be fully expecting that would be more than compensated for by value coming back into the company and being reflected in actually a growth in the dollar value around that equity moving forward. The important thing to note, really, that as the board of the general partner, we can only go so far down that particular track. And if we are successful in attracting those investors, obviously we have to come back to both yourselves and the board for the finalisation of those arrangements. So you do have a strong control point in place. And clearly we will maintain very strong communications with your management team and also with the Scion management team around that moving forward. So that's really the key actions, unless, Brian, there's something that I've missed.
Thank you, Russell. No, I think you've summed that up very well. You know, we do have, using the airport analogy, we do have a limited runway and we need to take off before the end of the runway, and we fully understand that. Given the limited amount of time that we had to find an alternative demonstration plant, I think we've made really good progress in a little less than a year, particularly when you think how long these infrastructure projects take to get off the ground. Just thinking about Rotorua's wastewater treatment plant and how long that will take to actually develop. So within 12 months, we have developed, we have found an alternative investor who has committed a significant amount of funding to doing this value engineering work in India. And if we can get the costs down to an acceptable level, they will commit to build a plant. I'd also say that the feedback that we've had from the other market opportunities we've been pursuing has been along similar lines. We do need to get the costs down, and we expect from the exercise that we're doing in India to be able to do that. The only other point I'd make is that we have also reduced our expenditure in line with our limited runway, and you will see that in the financial report that we have a positive variance to budget on expenditure currently of around about 20%.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation this morning. I hope it's not an inappropriate question, but how can you protect your intellectual property in India? I mean, is it going to be copied, and is there the potential for anything to happen to it in India?
There is the potential for something to happen to it in India. I don't see India as a good commercial market. The main point about the operation in India is that it will give us a demonstration plant, and the particular organisation that we're dealing with has stipulated that we have to build that plant in India, the reason for India. We do have good protection in our other markets. So we have the New Zealand patent in place. We have now also the Australian patent in place, and we have recently got the Singapore patent in place. And for China, we're in the final stages of examination for getting the patent in China in place. So for our key commercial markets, I think we have some good IP protection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, you answered, and mine was along the similar lines. So all I'm going to say is, kia kaha, good luck with India and China, and pleased to see it doing so well so far.
Councillor Gould.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your report this morning. I noticed your report is from October to December, and it's come to my attention that there's been a change of at least one director in the company. Am I correct, or am I not correct?
That is correct.
I think we have actually discussed this previously, and of course we have Stavros Michael now as your other appointee onto the board.
Mr. Tule, finally.
Kia ora kōrua. Awesome presentation. What's your path for investment?
I think investment is very dependent. We are running through a process right at the moment, so we're talking to a number of parties. And the key feedback that we've had from those parties is the importance of getting the demonstration plant underway. So I think the critical point is finishing off the work that we're currently doing in India and moving to the second stage of that, which will then give us a good, strong case for investment. We expect, well, we need to get that investment in place by the end of this financial year.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been moved and seconded that the presentations be received I don't know whether that's been put, but I'll put it anyway. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We now move to page 56. Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Hunt. Excuse me. That the report Establishment of Advisory Group Progress Development Company in Lakefront Big Moves be received. Been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Me.
Councillor O'Connell.
And Councillor Hunt.
G'day, gents. Gee, that was a quick move. Members, you've got a copy of the report from page 56 onwards. And the motion is that the committee recommends to council to approve the establishment of the advisory group for the next 6 months. If you'd just like to take us through the reasoning behind this, bearing in mind that this was part of a recommendation in December. So can you take us through the salient points and highlights of your presentation, please?
Kia ora tātou.
Welcome, Michael. Sorry, Michael Hancock.
Ki te whai. Ngā mihi kia tātou kua huhu mai te rangi nei. Nei rā ngā mihi kia koutou, katoa. So first off, just touching back on yours, Councillor Stewart, I'll provide a little background in terms of how we got to this decision, engaging Martin Jenkins, some of the guidance we received through the LTP workshop in December, and then I suppose touching also on some of the rationale which JP will possibly take over and expand on further, if that's okay. Okay, cool. So the establishment of the company focused on urban development is one of the big move projects approved through the refresh of the Rotorua 2030 vision. To assist us to provide us guidance on that particular big move project, we engaged Martin Jenkins. So Martin Jenkins was really to look at options for facilitating urban development for Rotorua in general. Coming off of that particular report that they provided to us in December, really was that the particular issues for urban development in Rotorua were quite diverse. The three main ones looked at were the lakefront CBD, industrial land and neighbourhood renewals. And further to that, they provided specific approaches for each of those back to the report which was presented back on 6th December during that LTP workshop. As part of that same workshop, we focused specifically also on the lakefront and CBD options, and the two options presented from Martin Jenkins. Option one was facilitate urban development within the council using internal mechanisms, and the second option was to establish an urban development entity, or in our case the CCO, with clear objectives and mandate provided by council. As part of that workshop, we engaged Sir Bob Harvey, who is chairman of Auckland Waterfront Development Agency, helped guide the developments on the Auckland waterfront, including Wynyard Quarter. So bringing on his expertise really to help guide how we put in place the advice and options presented from Martin Jenkins, and how we can put that into practice for our particular kaupapa that we have here in Rotorua. Coming from that workshop, the support really was around option two, but also us doing the next level of planning, which is what we look to engage through Bob around how we possibly put that into effect. Anything you want to touch on that? Cool.
Thanks, Michael. Councillors, again, it was a case of just saying, look, we got a very mechanistic report back from Martin Jenkins, so these are the tools you could use to start taking forward a revitalisation of the lakefront. And as you know, we've stopped and started many times over the last decade on the lakefront, so we really needed to take a different approach. And so once we had that sort of mechanistic approach, and we are consulting on what kind of framework we have in the long-term plan consultation. Sir Bob has really just gave us those insights about how you convert that vision into practice, the partnership and that direct investment in making things happen on the Auckland waterfront. So really our opportunity, having spent a bit of time with the Gifted Reserves group, dusting off the Wright Associates plans from 2010, was to say, well, how do we move forward now? So we really saw that as coming out the back of that forum where Sir Bob presented, to say actually we do need to keep the momentum there, and we do need to start looking at how we start teasing out in more detail that concept plan, and also engaging with this government around the new provincial development fund, which is certainly moving with a significant amount of speed for us. So that's become a significant focus for us, to start saying, how do we get in to the government's pipeline of potential investment projects? So just, I suppose, adding to that, Michelle Templer and I were at the Bay of Connections meeting yesterday, where the regional visitor economy strategy was finalised. So that picks up on our local one, as well as the other sort of regions or sub-regions of the Bay of Plenty. And so, of course, our two key priorities there are the forest and the lakefront. So what you saw in that presentation from Portia early on, which is focused around the LTP, is also likely to be recut to help us sort of promote the funding opportunities, both commercially, private investment, as well as back to government around that provincial development fund. So we've been asked just to move quite quickly into that space, and you can see a signal in here that we're now preparing an application under the guidance of this advisory group, to try and at least get some more funding in place to help us with that detailed design and start to move this forward. So the key for us is to say, yes, we have a consultation process underway around the mechanism, but regardless of this, there's an opportunity and a need for us to take the concept through and to start introducing it to government if we hope to achieve the level of funding that we've identified so far within the LTP framework. So I think Michael and I are happy to answer any questions if there is any.
Yeah, I've got a question for myself. One of the reasons why we've had problems with progressing lakefront development has been issues. You know, and one of the things I'm really nervous about is, in the previous presentation, there was nothing about the pier development, but we've certainly had at least 4 presentations on pier development in my time here. There's been the future of the Sound Shell, which none of us were prepared to touch, but it has now been touched. The commercial leases and their longevity. Rotorua's 5-star hotel proposal and international spa proposal with QE, where QE is. So will this advisory group of 3, I understand it's going to be, bring all that together, and who are they going to advise? Are they advising us as a council, or are they advising all the stakeholders? I think that's an important question. Councillor Rakawa, take your next after Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you.
Mr Chair, what they're doing is they're bringing together the expertise that has been garnered out of Auckland, and probably around the country. Actually, Wellington's another example where they have had that experience as well. Matching it to our partners here, so the Gifted Reserves and Pukaro Orowhata Trust, you specifically mentioned their 2 significant development sites on the lakefront, working with them to just see how we work through those other issues. So part of our development concept that needs to be looked at, I've mentioned funding, but there may be a number of other things we need to ask this government for through this provincial development fund, or through potential changes to the Reserves Act, for example, which would enable us to achieve this. But I think you've also touched on another issue, which is that advisory group now needs to reach out and pick up those other key stakeholders like Te Arawa Lakes Trust, who are aware of this, but really need to be fully engaged now with this advisory group and with the time to start really developing that to the next level. So that's really the driver for us at this stage.
Councillor Maxwell?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Chairman, and thank you, Michael and JP, for the good report in that. And the other one, I did enjoy the presentation that Sir Bob Harvey gave at one of our workshops that we had. That was really enlightening. The question that I have, it says here, for the other members to make up the advisory group will come from the Gifted Reserves Group. Now, we're meaning Ngāti Whakaue Gifted Reserves Group?
Yes.
Which will incorporate the other people of Ngāti Whakaue. And so the length of time that they'll be in place, and I read something, it also could lead into another group. Can you just elaborate that a bit more for me, thanks?
As you see, we've put a time frame on this initially, which is the 6 months. So that gives us as an advisory group a chance to say, look, there's a number of things we still need to work on around fleshing out the concept, getting that partnership working successfully, looking to the funding applications. It also enables us then for you to have made your decisions based on the consultation about whether the CCO is a right mechanism. And if it is, this group would be wrapped up and we would have a CCO in place around the lakefront. If the consultation comes back and says community doesn't believe and therefore your decision making is we don't want that mechanism, you've actually got a chance to say here's an advisory group that's been tested over the last 6 months. Is it possible for this to continue? And for us to manage the project internally. Now, when I talk about the Martin Jenkins report, it highlighted some of the pros and cons of those kind of approaches. And I think in your decision making around the LTP consultation document, you'll have to relook at those. But we also have a bit more of a steer of how successful we've been at least getting that initial feasibility funding from the Provincial Growth Fund, which is down at the regional level decision making, so it doesn't actually have to go into government itself. It can be done by officers within MB. So that's our first tranche of funding, which will help us progress some of these things forward. So there's an opportunity for us to keep this project moving and keep those conversations going while you wait for that public feedback, at which point you can choose which direction you'd like to
go. So we've got the thing rolling. Councillor Okawa-Tate.
Yes, thank you, Mr Chair. I'm going to actually, I'll move the second point in our recommendations because I do support this recommendation. I was pleased that I attended the LTP workshop where Sir Bob Harvey was present and gave and spoke to this. Because I must admit I did have a bit of a question mark prior to that. But, you know, we can't afford to hit and miss on these big projects. And I do know that somewhere buried in the bowels of this office there must be a pile of lakeside development proposals that high, because every few years they come and go and for various reasons. So we have somebody who's been he's been involved in Auckland, who's been active and well connected, and actually at the when he presented and spoke here in December, Sir Bob talked, he gave some insights into things that they perhaps would do differently now from their, from being involved. So that's going to be very helpful to us, and the potential for him and the others who might be on that to bring on board potential investors as well. So it's just that scope that we can tap into very quickly. And it is around perhaps the other two members. I mean, I don't know who they are and it's not for me to say, but will they be external from Rotorua people as well? It's just that I understand there is people from the reserves, yes, but it is, I don't want to lose the Rotorua flavour, even though Sir Bob brings that big picture view. To me it's important, and the socialisation of that anyway is very important, that we don't lose the Rotorua flavour. Just a question, really.
Through Mr Chair, Sir Bob is extremely well connected, and he's got that vision and that ability to really communicate back up into government so effectively, and as he has in Auckland. The two other people, one or two other people, are actually directly involved in the Waterfront Development Agency, so they have the technical skills. And just to reassure you, that's the matching of that external expertise from in that Auckland experience to the real drivers within the Gifted Reserves group, who are very clear about the vision and the aspirations they have for the lakefront. And I think that's an important matching of those two sets of skills. At this stage, it will just be council officers providing the support to them whilst we go through those application processes.
Councillor Donson's going to help me out here.
Yeah. Can I just help with the answer to Councillor Okawa-Tate's question?
Certainly.
And throw some light on it? So yesterday a day was spent with Sir Bob and CEO from the Auckland Waterfront Company and the CE and 2 directors from Pukeroa Whata. But in Sir Bob, and the point was made that Te Aroha Lakes Trust need to be in the loop as well, because what happens on the water is their consideration, and so they need to be part of any advisory group. So in the wet area, as Mr. Wilson put it. But just in terms of Sir Bob, he used to live here historically and worked. Managed the movie theatre, and he's recently finished reading Don Stafford's book on Te Aroha, and so he has a deceptively, I guess, deep insight into our history and a real passion for Rotorua. So I'd just like to throw that into the commentary as well.
Mr. Waru.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think Councillor Roka brought that up. I was actually going to ask what the significance of Bob Harvey actually having to be on their board was. I think that's pretty clear now. He's well connected. I do, however, think that, sometimes we need to back ourselves in these kind of kaupapa, but I'm glad that we've got the old local flavour in there as well. However, my concern is the number on there. It seems like sometimes if things come to clash, which they do every now and then on boards, as we all know, the mana whenua are outnumbered on this board. Kare pai te rā kia. Because I don't want the, respect to Sir Bob and his mates up in Akarana, but that's just my point. They're up in Akarana, Tamaki Makaurau. So that's my thing there, one concern that hopefully we can think about. The other one was, I wrote it down on my iPad.
Maybe they are.
Oh no. We agree with this
the interim,
with the recommendation for the interim year, but we do want to flag that that's an issue for Te Aroha, and maybe it's a Te Aroha Lakes Trust member. Kia ora,
Mr. Tule.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora kōrua. Awesome presentation. I realise we're hungry to develop, and I'm mindful, like the airport, the land there's lots of history in that land and lots of contentious history, especially around that place. I would say it's one of the most contentious places out there, the lakefront.
Especially with
But I think as a Te Aroha representative for the iwi, I understand you're talking to Pukeroa Uruawhata, that's cool, ki te pai. But the iwi there in particular are Hurunga Te Rangi and their Waitangi Tribunal Claim 410, Y410. I think you can't overlook that. I know that Pukeroa have the relationship through the reserve protocol, but the original land was Hurunga Te Rangi's land. And the Waitangi Tribunal report, it states it. We haven't gone through that tribunal process, but it's common knowledge that Hurunga Te Rangi are the guardians of that land, not Pukeroa the trust. So I understand that the relationship you've developed is with Pukeroa, but I want you to, as the iwi representative on Te Tātou, I would urge that you open up to not only the Waitangi Tribunal 410 claim, which is quite significant but hidden, but also the local residents of Ohinemutu. Other developments in the past have failed to engage in a meaningful and constructive way with the residents, and those developments have all been shut down. So yes, you're dealing with the centre, but on the left-hand side are the residents, and on the right-hand side are the mana whenua, tūturu. So kia ora,
I think you've made a very good point, and Councillor Donaldson and myself, who are on the Reserves Protocol Committee, and we're well aware of the issues with the claim position, which needs to be resolved. But I think you're mindful of that, ain't you, JB? You and your.
I just want to separate that not all Māoris are the same, and that one is a trust around a particular kaupapa, but Hurunga Te Rangi lived there. So they might have whakapapa links, but I think they're two separate bodies that you have to engage with.
And I think the other reassurance I hope you can take is that this is an advisory group for a short time, so it is only advisory, and certainly the membership is not in any way intended to suggest that there would be a voting situation where this is a collective thinking group to make sure that we're reaching out correctly to everyone involved, but also to bring that sort of expertise from around the country to bear here, and really to help some of the discussions that have been had in the past and have continued to stall. We certainly don't want to see the paper pile increase.
Councillor Gould, before we break for lunch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay, yeah. Councillor Gould.
Thank you. On page 58, on 7.1, an application of 400,000 to support feasibility economic impact analysis. Does that mean if we don't get that grant that this council is going to fund that 400,000 themselves? And I've got another question
JP?
too.
It's an interesting question, and I think we'll come to that when we come to that question. I think that's a really important position to be discussed. But what we're trying to make sure here is that we've started to signal how much we think the potential funding requirements are for the lakefront. And we have the opportunity, because of the different tiers in how they've structured the funding for the $1 billion, so this is the Provincial Growth Fund, that we should very quickly be able to put forward an application. And through the Bay of Connections, we actually signed off to yesterday, straight through to MB to seek some funding for some of that more detailed design work. So there's an example where the feasibility work, some of the economic analysis to support the business cases are being funded straight away by MB. So that's our first step. Circa 400,000 plus is what's being proposed, but we really see that as an important piece of research around making sure we have a valid and carefully thought through and developed business case to support the government's hopefully more significant investment through that provision.
Regional
Growth Fund. So it is an important step. We would have to consider funding it ourselves to strengthen our business case if we do not receive a grant. But that's been what's anticipated into that first year's funding being put forward into this LTP.
My second question is to do with page 56, 3 background. What do you mean by urban development with this particular proposal?
One of the things that we looked at was the sort of an urban development. The CCO takes a view around trying to facilitate good urban design, urban planning, urban development. So that's the sort of, so when we looked at the lakefront discussion, and one of those options was to start saying it's not just about the lakefront, we need to take a view of what needs to be supported and encouraged within those blocks that face the lakefront, because that's where the most beneficial investment will occur from the private sector. So that's where we need to look at sort of how do we match investors with funders, with landowners, I should say, and also provide the right level of information about, okay, so how do you find your way through the district plan? A bit like the discussion that was being held around the airport master planning.
Mr. Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm not trying to shut anyone down, I'm just mindful of time.
Mr. Chairman, I can't support the second part of the motion. The fact is that I've heard it expressed on the table here, is that why wasn't our local people given the opportunity to be on the advisory board? I'm not picking on Bob Harvey, but you've got some very smart and some very wealthy people in Rotorua that haven't got an opportunity to come and do what you're about to do with the urban development and the lakefront. They are whakapapa accordingly, it's accepted with our land and things like that. And I think Councillor Rotorua actually spoke about it as well. But why do we have to go to Auckland? Why do we have to have their experts? They're in a hell of a mess up there with their ports. Why can't we have our own people? We've got them. And I'll name one of them. One of the biggest operators in here at the moment is Mike Remains. He's sick at the moment, but that's the sort of people we've got internationally. You've got Ray Cook. right out throughout New Zealand. Those are the sort of people who've got the money to work with us in Māori as well as being able to have the pride of Rotorua. I don't want someone in from outside to alter us. We want to do what we want to do in this town, and that's what we should be doing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Good question, JP. Question's got to be asked, and he's asked it. Why was Sir Bob Harvey selected? Was it his particular expertise? Yes, if you wouldn't mind, I think it's a good question.
Through the chair, look, this is a challenge that is not unlike the exact challenge that was faced in Auckland Waterfront. The Auckland Waterfront was never going to be developed by one entity. The private sector were never going to be able to do it by themselves. Auckland Council was never going to do it by themselves. The government, central government, was never going to be able to do it by themselves. Ngāti Whātua were never going to be able to do it by themselves. And so what it required was a very different approach. And the approach was to say, fundamentally, we need to bring these multiple parties together in a way that they can work constructively and that they can each bring what they're able to actually bring to the table in terms of resources, in terms of funding or whatever, and to actually come up with a new shape for the Auckland Waterfront. Bearing in mind that the Auckland Waterfront had actually been in quite a rundown state for a long time, and that was not because people weren't trying to do anything about it. It was actually, we had in Auckland in those days, there were multiple parties all trying to do their thing. But it wasn't until you actually got a very different approach in place in Auckland that you started to see things coming together in a way that had never happened before. Bob Harvey was right at the centre of that. He actually facilitated all of that work. He was the chair of the Auckland Waterfront Agency. And as the chair, he brought together many different parties. He not only did that, but he also actually put together some very unique funding arrangements, bearing in mind that local government, central government, the private sector or iwi in Auckland did not have actually the capital base needed to put the funding to make the major differences. So what had to happen in Auckland was a very different approach to funding arrangements as well. Now, all of that experience is sitting there. All of it is sitting there. And the opportunity that we've been given with Sir Bob Harvey is the ability to tap in and learn from that experience. I don't think you should take the fact that our locals will not be involved, and you've mentioned some of our key developers. Before has been mentioned our key iwi and hapu groups for our area. All of these people will need to be around the table. But how you pull them around the table effectively, how you get alignment of effort and aspirations is actually the key that Sir Bob Harvey can bring into assistance.
Mr. Chairman, do I have a reply to that, please? It's not a question. Basically what's annoyed me is the fact is that we haven't given our local people the opportunity to stand up and to be declared fit to actually take part in this consultation program. And that's what's really annoying me.
Okay.
I don't want an Auckland flavour in Rotorua. I want a Rotorua flavour. And it's our born and bred local people that we should be having our consultation with. And that's how I feel about it.
I think your point's well made, Mr.
Give them a
Martin.
fair go, Mr. Chairman, our local people.
Your point is well made. Don't interrupt me. Your point is well made, Mr. Martin. This is a 6-month interim board to bring all the parties together, as you've said has to happen, as the iwi representatives have acknowledged it must happen from a mana whenua point of view. And from a business point of view that Councillor Raukawa Tate was talking, we needed somebody really independent. That's why I asked the question too, why was Bob Harvey chosen? From a Auckland waterfront development point of view, is a totally different issue to the Ports of Auckland issue. That is where all the controversy is. The waterfront development that Bob Harvey was involved in round at the viaduct and all round through that area was hugely, the Wynyard Quarter has been hugely successful. So let's use the man's expertise. You were probably right over time that, you know, with the Lakes Trust being engaged, Pukeroa Orowhata, the Ngāti Whakaue Reserves Protocol Committee, it needs someone to bring everything together. So unless you've got any further questions, I'll move on to Councillor.
Can you tell me who the other chosen two are?
Oh, I
please?
don't know at this stage. I don't
Well,
know.
why don't we know?
Well, because the motion
You're going
is-
to move a motion here saying that there's two others.
Come
going
on,
to be
Councillor
involved. Who are
Martin. The motion states that the committee recommends to council to approve the establishment of the advisory group for the next.
And you have a look at the paragraph in there where it talks about Bob Harvey and the chosen two. Who are the chosen two?
Where does it say that? JP, can you help us?
Yes, councillors, and as Deputy Mayor said yesterday, it was John Dalzell who came down with Sir Bob, so he's more the operational leadership within those companies and those agencies. So he's got that technical expertise. We've talked about Sir Bob's expertise, and obviously Alec and Malcolm from Pukeroa Orowhata Trust and Gifted Reserves Protocol at this stage. So, and again, just reassuring councillors, again, this was what was being proposed here and has been discussed with Gifted Reserves was an interim group to enable us to start progressing some of the relationship and discussions and making sure that we're getting our funding applications with that expertise to government as quickly as possible. So what we decide to do as a council around whether there's a CCO or some other mechanism is for another day decision.
Yeah,
Yes.
I want to see the facts for that. Councillor Hunt?
I'd like to second this motion, and having
you already
attended
have.
the workshop, thank you, having attended the workshop where it was presented, we have an opportunity to take the next step instead of just gathering more plans, which we've done. We've always stumbled at the next hurdle. We've done the consultation with the community, we've got plans ready, and they just sit there and gather dust. This is an opportunity to actually tap into this creative expertise of someone with incredible local government experience, having been Mayor of Waitakere for 18 years, incredible design experience in his previous role as a I was going to say architect, it's not that, as a brand, owning that sort of branding work that he did, and we know his experience in developing an area that reflects the values of the community he's developing it for. There's no way this won't have a Rotorua flavour on it, because of it, when it does get to that consultation stage, which is beyond this is just to get us past that first hurdle, which we've always stumbled on, to do the 6-month design, to get it up there so we can look at it. And having seen, we will make the decision on the CCOs further down the track. And certainly we've now had some, without the ones we've just had presentations on, that have given us quite a good flavour on the differences they've made. And that's for people to make their opinions on. So we've had some background on that. I think this is a wonderful step in the right direction. It was an inspiring presentation he gave, and I look forward to seeing the fruits of this 6 months. And then we get to choose where next. It's not setting anything in concrete at all. It is merely the first step, and a really good one with some very clever professional people at the helm.
I have some sympathy with where Mr. Martin's coming from in terms of setting things in concrete and a worrying factor that it won't have a Rotorua flavour, and I think we need to have those assurances with the involvement of Mana Whenua and Malcolm and others involved. I think that's got to rest with me in a positive way for me to support this going forward, but I'm happy to support the motion. Are there any other speakers to the motion? Councillor Donaldson?
Just thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly in support of the motion, and hopefully to allay some of Mr. Martin's fears. This is an advisory group. It's not a board. So we're not setting up a board here with the chairman. We're setting up an advisory group, and to establish relationships and leverage off connections and experience of a successful model. What I can also say is that there is also currently initiated by the Chamber of Commerce an inner city focus group, handing over the mantle from Mike Steins to Greg Brown, and Councillor Hunt and I attended the first meeting of that, and one of the developers and a couple of commercial real estate agents were amongst the group who gathered in the library a couple of weeks ago to look at, led by the Chamber, where do we go with our CBD in the future. And so those developers are involved, and at that meeting they were signalling that the climate is not right yet for investment. And so this is to give us the advice on how to create the right climate for those private developers to come on board and get stuck in and move Rotorua forward, especially our lakefront precinct. So I'm fully in support.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, wouldn't it have been nice to go out to your local people in conjunction with the Bob Harveys from Auckland and say, we are forming this particular forum, we need you people on board? What say? You didn't do it. You shut them out.
Oh, I think it's been done. All those discussions have been taken with.
You have lost your kaupapa accordingly. Charles?
Mr. Chairman, as the mover, may I have a final
Yes,
say? Thank
Councillor.
you. Actually, look, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that Mr. Martin is going to take us back to the future. I don't know whether you're reading this from the same document that I am, but I just say, you know, keep your shirt on. Keep your shirt on. This is just merely the start. We are looking at what this hopefully might look like in the future, and parochialism has hindered our progress in the past. And so we're very concerned, we're always very concerned that we won't lose our local flavour, and there are different points of entry at different times for our local experienced business people, entrepreneurs and innovators to come in. This is the start of what will hopefully be something exciting, and at some point we may end up with a completely different picture and different people involved. This is merely the start. So don't get your tits in a tangle, Mr. Martin. You know, let's remain on message.
I think comments, that you're a chairman of a committee, Councillor Rakawatate, and that.
Yes, I apologise, Mr. Chairman, that was an inappropriate comment, I'm sorry.
Because it's all very well debating the issues, but keep the personalities out of it. I've got the motion that the committee recommends to council to approve the establishment of the advisory group for the next 6 months. All those in favour, please say aye. I'll do that again. All those in favour, please say aye. Against?
I'm against.
Would you like, please? Mr. Martin wants his recorded. You said aye? Well, I didn't hear anything. I think we'll do it again. That the committee recommends to council to approve the establishment of the advisory group for the next 6 months. It's been moved by Rakawa Tate, seconded by Hunt. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
I'm against. Recorded, please.
Mr. Martin would like his objection recorded. Would someone like to? You abstained. Thank you, Mr. Bassani. Tuli has abstained. Would someone like to move that we go into confidential and then we'll adjourn for lunch? Councillor Kumar, seconded Councillor Rakawa Tate. That we go into confidential. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We'll retire for lunch and be back at 1:15.